And we are up and running. It's a really nice late summer or midsummer afternoon or morning, verging into afternoon. How are you this morning, Charlie?
I'm wonderful. Thank you very much, Chris. And you?
Really good. Enjoying this passage as we're watching summer start to wind down. And
Yeah.
if you look at the sky is very revealing, especially around the Great Lakes area, because as we hit that turning point, as we move toward the first part of autumn, the sky really becomes very visually exciting and beautiful. The clouds are coming in different colors, and you go down to Lake Michigan and the water is choppy, and you can feel the shift getting ready to happen as we hit the solstice coming up in another 3 weeks or so, 4 weeks.
Yeah. Yeah. I noticed it's interesting you say that. I just was grabbed this morning. My attention was grabbed by beautiful cloud formations. I was out earlier and it was just gorgeous.
Yeah, it's that late August
Yeah.
essence, I guess you could call it. I remember when I lived up in Door County, I would always spend a lot of time down at the waterfront, and all of a sudden you could see the winds shifting, and the prevailing winds would start bringing in a lot of choppy water, and it's kind of a gray, gunmetal gray tone through the clouds, and
Yeah.
okay, summer's saying goodbye.
It's packing up.
Exactly, and that's so typical of this world is the process of change. That's all it can do. There is no consistency.
Yeah. Yeah, it has to change, doesn't it? That's the way we set it up.
Exactly.
It's got to be on a timeline, right?
And that seems to be the thing. And so anyway, as I had mentioned to you earlier, I've been looking at the acceptance of the atonement. And in that first chapter, it's chapter 9, but in that first section, the acceptance of reality is, I think, very much a topic that needs to be observed right now, because we're watching a fear-driven base of people who imagine themselves to be Christian and are really not looking at anything that Christ taught or that Jesus taught. And it starts out here, fear of the will of God is one of the strangest beliefs the human mind has ever made. It could not possibly have occurred unless the mind were already profoundly split, making it possible for it to be afraid of what really is. Reality cannot threaten anything except illusions, since reality can only uphold truth. And if you are observing, it's like every day we're getting more and more this political madness, and that seems to be just amping up on an hourly basis. And we're seeing, Trump has just declared himself to be God incarnate, which in one sense is true. Unfortunately, he's not thinking of the same God that those who follow the course are thinking of. He likes that vengeance is mine kind of death, doom, and destruction vision of God. And that is really fearful. It's fear-laden.
Yeah, it's a God separated from the rest of us, huh? And isn't that everything that you're talking about is just a manifestation of that belief in separation, rather than this idea that reality cannot threaten anything except illusions. This belief in separation is nothing but that. And we keep telling ourselves these stories over and over and over again. Everybody's got their own little, what was the great word I had to, their own dialogue going on. Their own story going on, and what we want to do is learn the difference between that dialogue and the one that's true, the one that tells us, wait a minute, you are one with your Father. There is no separation. There is no duality. But we are so afraid of hearing that because it's going to put an end to our story. It's going to put an end to our dialogue. It's going to put an end to the, what we believe is reality, when in truth it's insanity. So it's a fearful thing, fear of the will of God. I mean, the will of God is nothing but love. And all our dialogues and all our stories are nothing but stories of, sin, guilt, and fear. So
absolutely, and it's
very
fascinating to look at the origin points of this very dark imagery of God, because it all comes from the Abrahamic traditions. Islam, Christianity, and Judaism, all three are very entrenched in the stories of God smiting people, constantly. I mean, God is, by their definition, is very frightening. But it says, as we go on here, it says, your will is not the ego's, and that is why the ego is against you. What seems to be the fear of God is really the fear of your own reality. It is impossible to learn anything consistently in a state of panic. If the purpose of this course is to help you remember what you are, and if you believe that what you are is fearful, then it must follow that you will not learn this course. Yet the reason for the course is that you do not know what you are. And that really is the bottom line, is redefining our identity. And that's what A Course in Miracles really is all about. You go to the Eastern traditions, Buddhism and Hinduism, and all of those different philosophies are anchored in the idea that God is love in manifestation. And what an extreme difference in belief systems that we're presented with here. So a lot of A Course in Miracles follows along the line of the Gita and the philosophy of Siddhartha. And that is a whole different perception of the nature and the content of what God is.
Yeah. So I'm just looking at that sentence right at the beginning of that second paragraph. Your will is not the ego's, and that is why the ego is against you, So my will truly is the will of my Father, in truth, in reality. And but I've got this separate story going on that's not true, that my will is the ego's will. It's always a story centered around the small s self, not the large s self. And that small s self has got this story going on, right? And then you go down to paragraph 3, and it says, if you do not know what your reality is, why would you be so sure that it is fearful? But we've told ourselves this story that it is, right? It says the association of truth and fear, which would be highly artificial at most, is particularly inappropriate in the minds of those who do not know what truth is. So we create our own sense of reality, we create our own storyline, we create our own dialogue, and we make that reality, and then we believe it. And there's no truth to it at all, because it is nothing but a story of separation. Not of oneness, not of love like you were just speaking, but one of duality, There's God and me, there's you and me, there's, this country and that country, there's this political party and that political party, and we just keep listening to this insane ranting and raving of the ego and buy into every bit of it. And I love it. I love it where Jesus keeps pointing out to us as he goes through the course, the way you think is insane. Truly is.
You would think that on our own we would somehow stumble onto these ideas, because again, you go to the Eastern traditions and they've been teaching this, especially in the more esoteric schools, forever. But it seems like the conditioning of Western thinking is so hinged on submission, submission and fear. and it will just beat you down. And you embrace this belief system that is so radically departed from truth that it's actually painful when you begin to awaken to look around you and realize, oh my God, these people are killing each other.
Yeah.
And it's absolutely uncalled for, you know. It says further down here, it says, you've imprisoned your will beyond your own awareness, where it remains, but cannot help you. So we get caught up in situations that we want to end, that we want to step out of, but our will has been so compromised by this sense of self and this sense of a world that we have created that we've become impotent. We cannot actually take a step away from these fear-driven thoughts. So, you know, it's insidious the way the whole thing works, but ultimately the Course is bringing us around full circle. It's giving us a complete 360-degree range of vision so that we can begin to step into even a tiny fraction of sanity momentarily throughout the day. And I think that's why it's important to stick with the Course and read, you know, just break open a book and read a sentence 3 or 4 times a day, because it pulls you back into that recognition that none of this is real, that you have created it, but you cannot fix it on your own. You have to submit to having higher consciousness work on your behalf.
Yeah, I love this section too, right? You know, where he's moving into talking about Holy Spirit, because that is the teacher that we have, all of us inside of us, that memory of God to go to, you know, and to start to understand that there is a different way to perceive, you know, what we're perceiving. There is a reality, as in capital R, capital R reality, the truth, you know, and there's the one we create, and Holy Spirit will help us distinguish between the two, you know. We can take that small r reality that we've created, we can take those, you know, situations, those stories we create, the insane thinking that we have, and take that to Holy Spirit and get a different interpretation, right? I mean, he's telling us right here, when I said that Holy Spirit's function is to sort out the truth from the false in your mind, I meant that he has the power to look into what you have hidden and recognize the will of God there. And again, we've hidden because we're fearful of it. We don't want to see it, right? Because recognition of this will can make it real to you, because he is in your mind, capital H, he is in your mind, and therefore he is your reality. So, and then it goes on to say, he is helping you to remember that what you are. Yet it is only what the Holy Spirit sees that you could possibly have. So, I mean, he's helping us see the truth, you know. And I think that, you know, getting that, I used to say to people all the time when I was working with them one-on-one, you know, I think everybody, well, maybe everybody is the wrong term, but, you know, I think we get to this point where we recognize we're beating our head against a brick wall, and we get tired of the blood streaming down the side of our head, and we say to ourselves, there's got to be another way, which is really what Helen and Bill did at the start of this, you know, when the Course was first scribed. You know, they asked, you know, they turned inside and asked for help. They didn't know really what they were doing or where they were going with it. They just surrendered into it, you know. And I think that's what we really, truly need to do, too. He's telling us that here, you know. Surrender this thinking over to the Holy Spirit. Just give it up, right? Turn it over to him and let him show you a different picture of the truth, you know. Not the one that you've created, not the darkness that you live in, right? And I love this line here. I've emphasized many times that the Holy Spirit will never call upon you to sacrifice anything. But if you ask the sacrifice of reality of yourself, the Holy Spirit must remind you that this is not God's will, because it is not yours. There's just one, in truth, just one will, the will of God, not the will of Charlie. You know?
Yeah, as that continues to go on, it says, if you did not have a split mind, you would recognize that willing is salvation, because it is communication. Yeah. So, you know, that gives us a clearer sense of direction as to what it is that we have to do. And of course, the big thing is we have to release the will of the self, the personal self.
Yeah.
Because that is such a crippled vision of our true identity.
Yeah.
And, and the ego is always there to reinforce these ideas. You go out and you see people, homeless people that are all beat up, living in the streets. You see people stumbling around in wheelchairs. I mean, this world really is pretty gruesome when you stop and actually look at it with open eyes. And it is through this process that we can arrive at that space where we realize this need not be. This is my creation. This is my fantasy. And I can release it. I can surrender it. And that's what the Holy Instant is all about, is that very, infinitesimal contact with our divinity that erases the illusion. And the more times we go back into that space, the more that we are erasing the content of our miscreation and allowing truth to filter through and to resolve the illusion.
Yeah. Yeah, I like that. I like that idea, the erasing of the old content. It really is. We take that to Holy Spirit, this picture of the darkness that we're working with, and take that to Holy Spirit and surrender that over. Just turn it over and ask for that guidance and help and clarity. And it doesn't mean that I don't fall prey to it again. As you just said, the ego is always working on us. It's always chipping away at us. And I might fall prey to the same darkness again, but I can always, again, go back to Holy Spirit. And I think with each attempt at that, you talked about the willingness a little bit, with each being willing to do that over and over and over again, we do start to erase the old way of seeing things, and we start to see with Holy Spirit's eyes, and Holy Spirit's vision, I should say, instead of, the eyes that I've created in my body that see everything and want to judge it.
Yeah, and as we look further down here, it says, ultimately, everyone must remember the will of God, because ultimately, everyone must recognize himself. So we're given a very solid assurance that at some point, whatever effort we're putting into our work with the Course, it will yield a positive result.
Yeah.
So I think the thing that I like the most about the Course is the fact that even though the ego mind is constantly stimulated by what appears to be chaos and, death, doom, and destruction, the reality is that part of us is growing stronger, very subtly, minute by minute, hour by hour, day by day, and awakening to our truth. So it can cause us disorientation at times. It can bring up fear. It can cause us to panic. But that's only because we're still honoring that ego mind that we have generated. So, it is a process that is going to pay off at some point. You just have to stick with it.
Yeah, yeah. And I love that a little further down there, to deny what is can only seem to be fearful, right? So again, when we fall off into that, kind of sliding backwards, it's just seemingly happening. It's not true. Because it says fear cannot be real without a cause, and God is the only cause, capital C,
Mm-hmm.
God is love, and you do want him. This is your will. Ask for this, and you will be answered, because you will be asking only for what belongs to you. So we always have that. Jesus is always showing us, this in the beautiful prose that he uses, the glory of the other thought process. The glory of working with the split mind with Holy Spirit as opposed to the ego, and as fearful as it might seem when we're listening to the ego, there's no fear involved when we're working with the Holy Spirit. It's clear, it's direct, it's peaceful, it's joyful, and those are the attributes of this. Those are the feelings that we experience when we're in that communion with Holy Spirit and in communion with our brothers.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. And it's, it reminds us that this is our true inheritance.
Yeah.
We cannot be deprived of that which God has willed for us.
Yeah.
So, then you have to ask yourself, am I being an idiot here? I could have peace instead of this ranting and raving and madness that I appear to be living in. So that goes back to the idea of Abraham and that whole idea of, the two brothers, one which became the Jews, the other which became the Arabs, and how one stole an inheritance from the other. And, the Course is telling us that that really can't happen. Nobody can steal your inheritance. You can reject it, but your inheritance comes from God. And so it is yours whenever you are willing to stop doing those things that are painful to you and just be still and accept what is rightfully a part of you.
Yeah. Yeah, there's so much, what's the best way to phrase this? There's so much peace in knowing that only God's will exists. All the crazy stories that I want to spend time in don't mean a thing. Only God's will exists. And it says down at the end of this section, right? Remember then that God's will is already possible and nothing else will ever be. This is the simple acceptance of reality because only that is real. You cannot distort reality and know what it is. And if you do distort reality, you will experience anxiety, depression, and ultimately panic because you are trying to make yourself unreal. When you feel these things, do not try to look beyond yourself for truth. For truth can only be within you. Say, therefore, Christ is in me, and where he is, God must be, for Christ is part of him. I was thinking about that this morning, the use of the word Christ throughout the Course. And, in the Western world, we have this idea that it's a special body, Jesus, the Christ, and the rest of us were kind of excluded from that. But the Course is very clear. Christ is a Son of God. It's all of us. And he's telling us right here, right? Christ is in me, and where he is, God must be. So, again, Jesus is always showing us the beautiful side of this, the glorious side of this, the joyous side of this changing and thinking, starting to think differently, think with the Holy Spirit rather than with the Holy Spirit. We don't need the fear and the anxiety and the panic, and when they're present, we know we're listening to the wrong teacher, and we simply need, to see it differently. And that anxiety, fear, and panic can all dissipate because they're not real.
Absolutely. Yeah, it brings to mind that passage in the New Testament where we are told that we live and move and have our being in God. So that puts a whole different set of images into the mind's eye, because we imagine ourselves outside of God, which of course is absolutely absurd. But it is that cherished belief that we somehow managed to step away from the truth, from reality. And all that did was just create a very dark dream. And, the deeper we go into the dream, the uglier the situation becomes. So it really is a matter of just simply allowing yourself to be gently awakened, because you're already there in God.
Yeah. Yeah, and I love this. You brought it up earlier, but the willingness, you know, it's so important to recognize that, you know, Jesus is telling us you just need a little willingness here, and your vision will be given to you. I mean, you're going to see it, right? You just need a little understanding, just a little willingness to understand, a willingness to see it different, a willingness to experience something different, and that gift is there for us. Always has been, never left us.
Yeah, that's the beauty is uh, God has never given up on us. God has always been more than simply a believer. God is a knower. God knows
Yeah,
that ultimately we will be restored. So,
our one.
so anyway, well, Charlie, so you got stuff to do today, out running around, and
Yeah, I've got my group in about half an hour. Got my group going, and then that's about it for today. I think. You know, I've got another errand later this afternoon, but we do have a good news with Barrett and Charlie coming up on September 7th, which is going to be held at our regular space in Glenview. And you can reach me at CSR Sales, SALES, at sbcglobal.net if you want to get information on attending. You can also attend, besides in person, you can attend online, and we'll have that set up. Barrett will be broadcasting from Germany. We'll hook up and do a live feed from him, a Zoom feed from him in Germany. And it's going to be at 10 o'clock on Saturday, September 7th. So of any of you out there to join us, please let us know.
yeah, that's awesome. Shrinking the world so that
Yeah.
you know there are no oceans dividing us.
No. Yeah.
Well,
We don't pay attention to time zones.
that's right. You do have to have a certain accountability, but the reality is that the sense of separation is shrinking more and more every year.
Yeah.
So, well, I will see you next week, and
Great.
we'll continue our dialogue about what's going on here with the answer to prayer.
Awesome. I look forward to it, Chris.
Yeah, you take care, and I'll see you in 7 days.
Thank you so much.
You bet.
Bye-bye.
Goodbye.